Hello everyone, Storm 101 here. Today we'll be having an update on a significant winter storm that is expected to roll through the state of Kentucky and the Ohio Valley, as well as expected to bring significant snow and ice storm. As well, we'll talk about that in more detail. We'll also talk about numbers. I got my first call for snow and ice is out. We'll talk about my forecast, but let's first get started with the NAM and really also talk about today. We had some snow showers in eastern Kentucky kind of throughout the day, maybe even a couple of snow squalls mixed in out there. But other than that, it's not been a bad day. Definitely chillier though. Highs have been stuck in the 30s and throughout most of the day, so we got that going on for us. Tomorrow, it's going to be a very cold start to the day. Lows in the teens and 20s tomorrow morning, so it's going to be cold, and we're going to be stuck in the 30s for highs for tomorrow. And then we pay attention off to our west. By the way, we are looking at the 18Z NAM model run, and you can see here probably as early as maybe tomorrow night we start to see some wintry precipitation trying to show up in western Kentucky. And you can see here by Saturday night into early Sunday morning, tries to show maybe a little light band of some snow trying to come through parts of central Kentucky. You're going to see this band of snow kind of develop as you go through Sunday morning, and eventually more precipitation is going to get filled in into western Kentucky as well. So when we wake up Sunday morning, there may not be a ton of precipitation out there, but that's going to increase as we go through the day, and it's going to continue to expand to the west. You can see by Sunday afternoon, you can really see the precipitation out there, even potentially periods of moderate, maybe at times heavy snow across parts of central and northern Kentucky. Got some sleet mixing, and that's the purple color there, that is sleet, and then this reddish color is freezing rain, and the green is just plain old rain. And our surface low is way back in Oklahoma Sunday Sunday afternoon out there. And as we move on into Sunday evening, you can really see that freezing rain and sleet mixture start to really take shape. Northern Kentucky and northeastern Kentucky still snow, and that snow can certainly be heavy at times. But a little bit farther to the south here, we got that sleet and freezing rain ongoing out there. And as we kind of continue through Sunday evening into Monday night, here comes our low pressure system entering the Tennessee Valley, 1,004 millibar low west of Nashville. NAM really likes to take this rain line almost all the way up to the I-64 corridor. I'm not sure if it's going to get that far north or not. We may not find that out until tomorrow here. But this is one of the more farther northern models in terms of the rain and freezing rain line. But even being farther north, you can still see areas along it just north of I-64 just getting hammered with freezing rain. And meanwhile, farther up north towards Indiana and Ohio, periods of moderate to heavy snow is ongoing out there. You will also notice here as that low pressure starts to move into western Tennessee, western Kentucky, we got a dry slot that's coming in here. And this seems to be a more likely scenario with this dry slot coming in, which means that we'll get a period of some probably generally lighter precipitation. Might be a little bit too dry for my liking because we still got a stronger surface low, 1,001 millibar low. There's still going to be a decent amount of lift out there, so it might be a little bit of an overkill on that dry slot, but either way, we'll have some lighter precipitation move in here by Sunday night. That's actually bad news for freezing rain, because freezing rain, being light, can accumulate better than heavy freezing rain out there. And you can see how that low there continues to move off to the east and actually trend stronger, 997 millibar low along the West Virginia and Virginia state border. And if that's the case, there can certainly be a pretty good deformation band moving somewhere across parts of central and northern Kentucky, bringing a good round of some snow on the backside of it. And at the same time, you'll notice here these very tight isobars on the backside of it. That's an indication for strong winds, and that's actually really bad news, because with all that ice that we got on the trees and the power lines out there, when you add in 20 to 30 mile per hour winds, that's going to create a lot of strain on them tree limbs and power lines, and that's going to increase the risk for power outages out there. And in my personal opinion, that's the biggest concern. Get that significant ice and then have the strong wind gusts come in. That's a really bad combination out there. And you can see here by Monday evening it moves out of eastern Kentucky. So that's the NAM model here. We'll come back to this in a little bit here. We'll start talking about numbers for a little bit. Let's check out the high-res Canadian here. One of the more consistent models here. And you'll be able to see here by Sunday afternoon, got that period of light to maybe at times moderate to heavy snow on the leading edge of this precipitation shield out there. And you can also see a lot of sleet out there, plenty of freezing rain, especially across towards southern Kentucky. And notably a little bit farther south compared to the NAM model here, 1002 millbar low, just about northwest of Nashville, Tennessee. While that's ongoing, you got potentially some heavy sleet just along north of I-64, and then just south of I-64, it's periods of freezing rain out there. And you can see how that low there just kind of continues to slide across southern Kentucky. And as soon as it gets into eastern Kentucky, all the precipitation is left back here to transition over to snow. And I know it shows still some freezing rain and sleet, but that's going to be snow back there. High-res Canadian's having some precipitation type issues on this map here, and I'll kind of show you guys. Actually, you know what? Let's start talking about that right now. So the way we identify precipitation types, or actually one way to look at precipitation types, is forecast soundings here. Precipitation type maps can sometimes be wrong on the weather models, so it's very important to double check on forecast soundings, which I'll show you guys here right now. So let's get a sounding up there in Covington, Kentucky, where the precip type map says it's snow, and it would be correct. And I want you guys to be focused on down here in this red box. This is where we focus on, because this line right here, I'll highlight this in pink, is the right through here. That's the freezing line. Let me do a little bit better job on highlighting that. Right about here is the freezing line. Okay, when that red and green line passes the this highlighted in pink, that's temperatures above freezing. When that red line, which is the temperature line, crosses over that line right here, that means there's temperatures above 32 degrees, which in this case on the sounding here, the temperatures from the surface all the way up into the entire column of the atmosphere is below freezing, which means this would be all snow. So let's go a little bit farther south. Let's check out where it says it thinks it's sleeting. So let's get a sounding not far from Lexington. Okay, you get a little bit of a different story here. So once again, looking at this here, and I'll highlight that line again. And you can see here, now the surface air temperature is 24 degrees. It's more than cold enough for snow at the surface, but look what's happening about a mile above our heads. There's a little area of milder air that goes above freezing, above 32 degrees. With that little bit of milder air, this is what you call the warm air advection. When you have a little bit of that going on, you can get some sleet, and this is where you get the change of the precipitation types. And this is where it gets complicated, because the stronger the warm air advection, that can change your precipitation types. And unfortunately, models don't do a very good job with that. So that's a classic sounding for sleet. What about freezing rain? You'll be able to see here, there's actually more milder air above the surface here. And you can see here how that line goes way out there, which means temperatures are way above freezing, about a mile above our heads. But you can see here the ground temperature is 32 degrees. So it's just about there with freezing rain. Let's get a little better sounding there. That kind of gives you an example of a wrong sounding there. That's not really freezing rain. And the precip, that would actually be more in the way of rain. But the precipitation type map says it's freezing rain. So you always got to double check to make sure that the model, the precipitation type map matches with the forecast soundings. It's very important to be looking into this stuff here if you forecast the weather like I do. Here's a classic sounding for freezing rain. So you got the warm air advection, coming into place here. So temperature's way above freezing between the 700 and 850 millibar line. So that's a mile above our heads. At the surface, the temperature is 30 degrees. So it starts as snow way up here, but when it goes through that warm air advection, it goes into water droplets. It melts into rain droplets. But where the cold air is so shallow at the surface, it doesn't have time to refreeze into sleet or go back to snow. So it falls as rain, but when it hits contact, when it's below 32 degrees, it freezes. And that's how you get freezing rain out there. So that's basically how freezing rain works. Now, freezing rain can be a little bit complicated because, let me tell you guys this. Some research was done a few years ago about the rainfall rates of freezing rain, the rates of freezing rain. Light to moderate freezing rain is when it can accumulate or accelerate. I forgot the term of what it's called when freezing rain it turns into ice on contact. I forgot what that word is called. I'm going to look that up after the video. But when you have heavy freezing rain, when the rain goes onto contact, it just washes off. If it don't have time to sit there and freeze, it just washes off. So it's much more difficult for ice to accumulate when freezing rain is at a pretty high rate. So basically, heavy freezing rain, it doesn't really accumulate on trees or power lines. It just runs off like normal rain. But if it's light to moderate, that's when it gets rough. That's when it can actually start to accumulate on power lines and trees. And that's where the bad stuff comes in here. So that's also going to be a very important factor, which in this case here, the high-risk Canadian shows some moderate to maybe at times heavy freezing rain. So not all of this is going to accumulate on contact, which I'll show you guys some freezing rain maps here in a few minutes. But continuing on with looking at the high-risk Canadian, 1,002 millibar low moving across south central Kentucky Sunday night through Monday morning. And then again, the precipitation type map is wrong. I double checked this before the video. This should be all snow in here, but for some reason it wants to mix in freezing rain and sleet, and I'll show you guys for proof. So the precipitation type map thinks it's sleet. Well, when you look at the forecast sounding, there's no warm air advection in place. No warm air advection. Ignore this down here. Don't pay attention to that. That's going to be wrong half of the time, unfortunately. But you can see here, no warm air from the ground all the way up into the atmosphere. So it'll be all snow. I don't know why it thinks it's sleeting there or freezing rain. But the precipitation type map is wrong on that. And unfortunately, you're going to see some of those errors on some of these computer models. They're not perfect, unfortunately. So you always got to double check on them forecast settings when you forecast the weather, especially for snowfall and ice accumulation forecasts when you make those. So that's the high-res Canadian there for precip type. Let's start talking about snow here. So let's go back to the NAM and talk about snow here. So NAM a little bit farther north of the snow. And here comes that first initial wave of that band of snow here as it comes in here. Could be coming in at a pretty decent clip here. Using the Kuchera ratio, could be at least a couple of inches of snow along the leading edge of that. That might be a little bit overdone, but I can see some areas getting anywhere from like 1 to maybe 3 inches of snow on the leading edge of that. Though it would probably be a little bit higher across northern Kentucky. Meanwhile, probably be a little bit less, a little bit farther to the south and west. But as we go for the entire run here, you can see where it's a little bit farther north. That's where the heaviest of the snowfall totals would be. Plus, the storm system's a little bit stronger, which means more snow for areas up towards the north, which you can see some rather absurdly high snowfall totals. Double digits up there in Ohio along the I-70 corridor. I don't think they're going to see 17 inches of snow up there, though. That's likely overdone. But some double-digit snowfall totals is not out of the question up towards the north. Meanwhile, down here in Kentucky, you can see here along the north of I-64, NAM says could be a good hit of snow. Though once again, I think it's a little bit overdone. I don't think Maysville's going to get 13 inches of snow out there. But then again, still could get a lot of snow, even though if you transition over to sleet or freezing rain here. And of course, them amounts rapidly drop the farther south you go. You can see across southern Kentucky, there really isn't much out there. So let's move on to the highest Canadian. Highest Canadian is farther south here, with this low here. And you can see that first initial band of snow coming through. Now, I'm not buying much into this thumping snow potential here. It's got 17 inches just north of Owensboro. That's not going to happen. Likely way overdone here. But it does show that potential for heavy snow on the leading edge of probably that sleet transition line here. Probably just out ahead of that sleet transition line could be a period of some very heavy snow. But these numbers here are likely overdone on the highest Canadian. But you can see those snowfall amounts start to go up across northern Kentucky, and then you add in the factor of wraparound snows. This is what you get here. Across southern Kentucky, not much, probably anywhere from a coating, maybe 2 inches of snow. And then you get up towards, the Bluegrass region and northern Kentucky. That's where you could see a good amount of snow out there. But then again, I think this is overdone down here. But up towards the north, it also shows the potential for double-digit snowfall totals as well up there. So there could be quite a bit of snow to work with this system. Okay, let's talk about freezing rain. Let's talk about the bad stuff. Excuse me. And now, don't go crazy with these numbers here. And you can see the numbers are absurdly high. Don't take these numbers seriously. Cut these numbers in half, and that would be a more accurate number. And the reason why it's so high, because it's not taking into account of what we were talking about earlier. With the heavy freeze rain doesn't accumulate nearly as well, it basically assumes that any freezing rain that falls from the sky is going to accumulate, which is not true. You got to use what's known as the FRAM, which does take into the equation of the modern and heavy freezing rain stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have access to that, so I can't show you guys. If I had access to it, I would show you guys. But unfortunately, I do not. So I can only show you this total freezing rate QPF, which means the amount of rain or moisture is falling from the sky towards the surface. That's what QPF pretty much means. But you can see here some pretty hefty ice totals. Even if you be more conservative, cutting this in half, like it shows Lexington getting almost an inch of ice, cut that in half, that's probably about a half an inch of ice. But you can see here farther back to the west, like west of Louisville, it's got 1.25 or an inch and a half. Well, cut that in half, you could be talking about potentially up to 3/4 of an inch of ice. So you're probably talking about a potential swath of a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice out there with this system here. And that's the maximum potential on the icy side as of right now. What about the Harris Canadian? It's a little bit farther south. You can see here, as you expect here, it's farther south. Then again, take off 50% of these numbers here, and that would be a more accurate number to look at. And even if you cut these numbers in half, you're still talking about a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice that could potentially fall and accumulate. And that's enough to cause some big problems out there. So not looking very good at the moment. And really, most of the models are actually kind of close to the Harris Canadian solution here. More of the models are a little bit farther south here. Some are a little bit in between the NAM and the Harris Canadian out there. Let's check out the Icon model, the 18Z run of the Icon here. And you can see here, starting off as a period of heavy snow, then transitioning to freezing rain and sleet. Nobly farther south here compared to previous runs. Yesterday it headed farther north. Today it's farther south here. So models have ticked a little bit south today. And you can still see out there a good amount of freezing rain comes through. We get a dry slot, and then another round of snow comes in as that low transfers energy to the east coast, towards the east coast. A new low is actually going to develop somewhere near the mid-Atlantic out there. So that's the Icon. Let's check out the GFS. I do not want to look into the snow map. You guys were not supposed to see that. But while that there loads, let's move on to the European model. This is the 12Z run of the Euro. One of the more consistent models on this system here. So I'll tell you guys, it's pretty darn similar to the Harris Canadian. Nobody a little bit far south, big hit of ice, mostly snow across northern Kentucky. It doesn't really bring that sleet line that far to the north. But then you can see here, just like the other models here, we get a decent hit of snow on the backside of the low, and then the winds really start to kick in as well. And then going back to the GFS model, this is going to be the last model we're going to look at here. And you can see here, starts off with snow, transition over to sleet and freezing rain here. And it's closer to the NAM model here. More of the American models are a little bit farther north compared to the rest of the model guidance here. And I'll show you guys why there's some disagreements here with the exact track of the low. I'll show you guys that a little bit later in the video. But you can see here 1,000 millbar low moving across southern Kentucky. And then since it gets towards the Appalachian Mountains, everybody should be transitioning over to snow on Monday with that very gusty northerly wind flow. Which, by the way, with this very gusty northerly wind flow, we can actually catch in on some moisture from the Great Lakes of Lake Michigan and maybe even Lake Erie as well. Anytime when you get a strong northerly wind with very cold temperatures, that moisture from Lake Michigan and even at times Lake Erie can actually make it down to Kentucky. So for some areas in Kentucky, you might get a little bit of lake effect snow enhancement on the backside of the system as well. So that's going to be another thing to watch as well. Excuse me. So now let's move on to my forecast. Let's talk about the snow. So I got a coating to an inch of snow across pretty much the first and second southern row counties down towards the Tennessee border. Generally a coating inch of snow. There's an outside chance that some areas may not get any snow accumulation, but for the most part, it's going to be a coating to an inch. That would include places like Murray, Hopkinsville, Fort Campbell, Russellville, Monticello, Williamsburg down to Middlesboro. In the lighter blue shade, that is 1 to 3 inches. And that kind of stretches from Paducah through Princeton, Madisonville, Lynchville, Campbellsville, Somerset, London, back down towards Harlan, and Hazard. And then we start to get in some of those bigger snowfall totals. The dark blue is 3 to 6 inches, and it stretches from Evansville, Hendersonville, Owensboro, E-Town, the entire Bluegrass region, the Louisville area, Moorhead, all the way down to Pikeville and Prestonsburg. In those areas there will have the potential to see 3 to 6 inches of snow. That number can change. That's an iffy area to predict for snow because we don't know exactly how long that first initial wave of snow is going to last. You did see some malls don't show a lot of snow, others show quite a bit. So there's a lot of disagreement on how much snow there's going to be on the leading edge of that precipitation band, or before you transition. See how long you're going to last in that snow is still a question that needs to be answered. But generally speaking, I think it's going to be 3 to 6 inches, but that number can change. And then finally, far north of Kentucky, areas that probably will stay as mostly snow, but can now roll out some sleet and maybe a little bit freezing rain mixed in there. But for areas that will see mostly snow, could be anywhere from 6 to 10 inches of snow. So that'd be some pretty hefty snowfall amounts up there. And then again, there's still plenty of time for changes, and a more accurate weather data does come in later tonight into tomorrow, so we'll have a better idea on some of these numbers here probably by tomorrow. But for right now, the current forecast I have right here looks good. And by the way, this includes sleet as well. There's going to be quite a bit of sleet. Some areas may even potentially get an inch of sleet. Now, if you end up seeing more sleet than snow, then that is really going to cut your snowfall totals. Sleet can really cut down snowfall totals. So that's another factor as well. But some areas could potentially see anywhere from a half an inch to maybe upwards an inch and a half of sleet, especially in areas within the 3 to 6, and maybe even some areas in the 6 to 10 could get a decent amount of sleet as well. And okay, let's get to the worst part of all of this. The ice. Generally across southern Kentucky could be anywhere from a trace to a tenth of an inch of ice in that lightest pink. This high pink color can be anywhere from a tenth of an inch to a quarter of an inch of ice. That would include Paducah, Eddyville, Campbellsville, Columbia, Hazard, all the way towards Pikeville. And you can see here there's a secondary area up in northern Kentucky. That would include LaGrange and Maysville, and there's another trace to a tenth of an inch of ice. That would include Dry Ridge, Williamstown, and Madison. Excuse me, up there as well. And then last but not least, this red shade right here. This is where the greatest ice storm potential exists for right now. Could be anywhere from a quarter inch to potentially as much as 3/4 of an inch of ice. If we see those higher end amounts verified, that's going to be pretty rough for areas that get up towards the higher end amount. Now, there's still some time for changes with this as well. And on the next update, I probably would have to add an extra area here to really specify on the amounts. I may add an area of a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice. We'll see. But the area I would really watch for the potential for those higher end totals is probably going to be right in here in that yellow circle. That being the area I would watch the closest here on the ice there. So let's talk about the differences here. So we know the GFS is farther north, Euro is farther south. Why are they different in terms of storm track? Well, you have to look into the energy, the vorticity in the upper parts of the atmosphere. And it's actually the tilt of the system here. You'll see here the GFS is kind of more Nutritail, which usually means a more energetic system and it's a little bit stronger. It can fight against the cold air a little bit better, so it tends to track a little bit farther north. And this is also for Sunday afternoon, by the way, for the time of this. Let's go to the European model at that exact same time frame. You see a difference here how the trough is placed. It's more positively tilt. And when you have a more positively tilt trough, it's weaker and it has a more southerly track. So the positioning of the trough, neutral tilt, or is it going to be positively tilt? That can make a big difference on how far north the freezing rain and sleet line can go. But I will say this, European model would be the worst case scenario. We could be in the freezing rain line would be a little bit farther south. Plus some areas can be in freezing rain for a longer duration. With more of a positively tilt type of storm. Meanwhile, for the GFS, where it's a little bit stronger and also more neutral tilt of the trough, it could be farther north. More of us can get some rain out of it, which can help us knock down the higher end ice amounts. So that's kind of where we're at right now. The GFS and the NAM and even the highest NAM is notably farther north, while the rest of the guidance is farther south. So there's a little bit of disagreement, but for right now there's more agreement for a more southerly track than a northerly track. Could that change? Absolutely. We are still getting the observations of the system here. It is coming on shore, which means we get more accurate weather data tonight, and then we can really have a really good deep dive into the system tomorrow. Let's talk about the National Weather Service forecast here. So this is for snow. Excuse me. You can see here across southern Kentucky, not much. Generally a coating to 1, maybe almost 2 inches of snow for some areas. A little bit farther to north, just south of the I-64 corridor, could be a couple of inches of snow to maybe several inches of snow out there. You can see they got Lexington 4 to 6, Louisville 4 to 7. And then you look at north of I-64, that's where the highest snowfall amounts are. And that could include potential for double-digit, snowfall totals. And here's the statewide view here. That was focused on the National Service Louisville's viewing area. Here's a statewide view. And you can see here they got Covington forecasted to get 6 to 10 inches, Ashland 5 to 8. I agree with it, overall. It's kind of close to what I got out there. But it also has 2 other maps. Basically kind of tells you what happens if it busts and what happens if it overperforms. Let's look at it, what happens if the snow busts. What's the lowest end? What's the floor on the snow? Well, here's a map for it. Even though with the floor, there's still quite a bit of snow out there. North of I-64 could be anywhere from 4 to 6. Areas along it just south could be anywhere from 1 to 3. And you can see across parts of southern Kentucky may not see any snow accumulation. And that's the floor. What about the ceiling? What's the ceiling? Well, you can see everywhere, just about everywhere Kentucky could get snow on the ground. But check out the snowfall amounts along North I-64. It's generally anywhere from 8 to potentially up to 12 inches. That's the boom potential. That's what happens if the snow overperforms. If the snow overperforms, this is what it could look like. So there's that. They also got their ice forecasts out, so let's look into that. And here's their ice accumulation forecast. And you can see it definitely looks messy, especially up across northern Kentucky where you meet with different National Weather Service offices. That's why it looks messy because there's some disagreements with the National Service offices. Either way, though, just about everybody in Kentucky has potential to get some type of ice accumulation. But the area of greatest concern is right in here. It's hard to see, but in that darker red shade of color, which is right about in here, could see anywhere from a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice. Now, I also read the National Service Louisville's discussion from this afternoon. They said they cannot rule out some areas potentially getting close to an inch of ice. If we get up there, that's going to be pretty darn rough if we see areas getting about an inch of ice. But right now, the area of greatest concern is in this yellow circle as it stands right now. That would be the area of the greatest concern. So that's generally along the western and Bluegrass Parkways, and then kind of along and just south of I-64 east of Lexington. So that will be, places like Moorhead, Lexington, Richmond, Danville, Harrodsburg, E-Town, maybe even back towards Owensboro as well. Those are the areas that currently have the greatest concern for the ice as it stands right now. Could it shift to the north or maybe a little more to the south? Absolutely. There is room for it to shift to the north or the south. We'll see what the model data does with the more accurate data tomorrow. And one last thing before I end the video, let's talk about the temperatures. The temperatures coming behind the system. Now, on the onset of this system here, if we go to Sunday morning here, you can see here a lot of us are pretty cold Sunday morning. Central and eastern Kentucky, low to mid 20s. Some pretty cold temperatures. Meanwhile, western Kentucky, it's a little bit milder. Even in far western Kentucky, especially around Paducah, it's already getting above freezing. They're just seeing plain rain. But anybody that's like 31 degrees and below, that's where you have wintry precipitation ongoing. So if we move to towards Sunday afternoon, you can see some of us don't warm up that much. Lexington 25, Louisville 26, Bowling Green's 30, Somerset's 27. These are areas that would currently be experiencing winter precipitation. The only area that would be seeing plain rain could be across far southern Kentucky. And look at this warm nose coming in here. Look at that. Nashville, Tennessee could be almost 50 degrees. Memphis would be about 60. And meanwhile, for us up here, we're still stuck in the 20s. And then check this out here. As we get into Sunday evening into Sunday night, check out the difference on the temperatures here. Covington 22, Monticello 41. That's a big difference on the temperatures from north to south. So there's going to be a pretty impressive temperature gradient, across the state here, where you go from, like Monticello 42 to Somerset 32, and then eventually up towards like Stanford and Mount Vernon 30 or 29. So a pretty impressive temperature gradient, and it's even warmer down towards Middle Tennessee. There can actually be thunderstorms down there in Tennessee around the same time. 54 for Nashville. So there's that. And speaking of thunder, almost forgot. If you're asking if there's potential for thunder snow, thunder sleet, or thunder freezing rain, yes, there is. There is a little bit of instability out there, and really all you need is about 100 joules per kilogram of instability. It doesn't matter if it's surface-based or elevated. Most of its instability would be elevated, but if you manage to get at least 100 joules per kilogram of instability in your environment, you can get a few rumbles of thunder, which means you could get some thunder snow, thunder sleet, or thunder freezing rain. So don't be surprised if you hear a few rumbles of thunder throughout the day on Sunday. There will be a little bit of instability out there to work with. So that's going to be very interesting to monitor as well. And going back to temperatures here, as I load their departs, this is Monday afternoon. Generally mid-20s statewide. And you can see here, going into Tuesday morning here, if we can see some clearing out there, temperatures will drop like a rock. You can see some areas getting down into the single digits. If areas got some cloud cover, they could still be stuck in the 20s. If some of this cloud cover may actually be coming from Lake Michigan, where we got all that moisture and that strong northerly wind, you can get some moisture from Lake Michigan. You can even get some snowflakes out of it as well. And check out those very cold temperatures back towards Missouri. Below zero temperature readings, Tuesday morning. And you can see if we don't warm up that much, some of us may, depending on our ice and snowpack, some areas may be stuck in the teens all day for Tuesday. And then check this out here for Wednesday morning lows here. Lows deep in the single digits here. And if you get clearing, could be close to 0 degrees. Now that would be rough. And you can see here for highs for Wednesday, we could be stuck in the teens all day. And then here we go, temperatures crash again. This is Thursday morning lows. Widespread single digits. And then again, depending on how much snow you got in terms of snowpack, could be around 0 like it is back towards Missouri. And then again, you're stuck in the teens all day. I mean, the European models got temperature stuck in the low to mid-teens for highs on Thursday. That's pretty darn cold. And then Friday morning, lows once again deep in the single digits, could be around 0 for some areas to start off with for your Friday morning. And then finally, we may get a tiny bit of moderation towards the weekend. And the point of these temperatures here is that where the temperatures are so cold, whatever snow or ice that we get is not going to melt for days. We can still have almost the same amount of snow and ice, potentially all the way until next week. And throughout most of the week, we'll probably have snow and ice on the ground. So, yeah, snow and ice here to stay. And there could be another system towards late next week, next Friday into next Saturday. There could be another storm system to watch. Now, if that ends up making up here in Kentucky, that would be an all-snow event. But that's something to talk about in a later video. But regardless of how the scenarios play out for your Sunday to Monday, it's going to get very cold behind the system, and it's going to last for several days. But anyways, guys, this is all I've got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this weather update. If you guys like this video, hit the like button. If you really like my channel, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you guys got any questions, you can put in the comment section down below. I'll answer you guys' questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye, and have a good day.